So good morning in the US and good evening in China. My name is Ali Rahim. I'm professor of architecture and director of the Advanced Architecture Design program at the Weitzman School. And that's clearly located at the University of Pennsylvania. The AAD program is hosting a series of talks titled Meet the Building Experts. And this is really a series that I conceive of where the invitee is a practitioner as well as an educator. And in addition to that, their work, their buildings serve as exemplary in the discipline and for the discipline of architecture. So the talks are from now on at this time, 9 a.m. Eastern time, at 10 p.m. Beijing time. And the first three talks have been by Western architects. And then from next week, we shift to three Eastern architects. So the Western architects, as you all know, have included Preston Scott Cohen, Nader Tarani, and now Patrik Schumacher, who's going to wrap up the Western cohort, as it were. And then we shift east to Shuwei Guo, Rosanna Hu, and Zhu Pei. So, it's incredible to introduce Patrik. Patrik and I have known each other for many, many years. And I feel like we've collaborated in the academy in many different ways. We've been on reviews, we've been in reviews at the DRL for many years. And it's also, and then of course the Angewandte, and I even completely forgot that we co-taught the studio at the Angewandte many, many years ago. For Zaha Hadid when she took a sabbatical. So it's really great to introduce him to our students. And, in a funny way, Patrik doesn't need any introduction because he's so well known and he's so famous. But on the other hand, I want to explain to my students why that's the case. It's not that, okay, it's Patrik Schumacher, he leads Zaha Hadid Architects, but, I find that a lot of people in the world don't know what it takes to become someone of your stature, right? And it's really important for them to understand what it takes. So I think that your work and Zaha's work and the firm's work is really about building forms, but also developing your own design techniques and clearly construction methodologies where these new ideas meet the building industry. And it's very difficult to achieve some of the projects that you have built. Patrik himself has joined Zaha Hadid Architects in 1988 and has been a seminal force at the practice that has elevated it from being a very well-known person, an individual, Zaha Hadid herself, but also into a global brand where it's become Zaha Hadid Architects. And I think that Patrik is really credited to push that into a 400-person, 5-office, firm all over the world. And from 2003, so 5 years into Zaha, working for Zaha, he started really co-authoring every project with Zaha. And I've seen them work together. I've seen them eat dinner together. I've just watched that relationship. And I think and teach together, I should say. And it's an incredible relationship that has continually, I think, challenged both of them. They both challenged each other. It was never a one-way street. It was always a two-way street, discussing ideas, and then discussing wardrobes, right, Patrik? I mean, it went into every avenue, and I witnessed a lot of those discussions. And, importantly, all of you know all of Zaha Hadid Architects projects, but the MAXXI, I thought, was the first building that really took these ideas to a completely different level. And that's the Museum of the 21st Century Art in Rome, and then the Evelyn Grace Academy in London. They both won the Stirling Prize, which is, it's the Academy Awards of Architecture in the UK that are bestowed on you by the Royal British RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects. In addition, they've constructed so many projects in China, including the Guangzhou Opera House, Soho, Beijing, and the newly constructed Lisa Tower, which is also in Beijing. And Patrik is kindly going to explain that building to us today. Look, if you all want to be experts, and I think you do, that's why you're in this program at Penn. You're really thoughtful in developing your own careers. Just look at his trajectory. Not only did he start working for a well-known architect in 1988, but he pushed that into a global firm, which is incredibly well-known. In addition to that, he has written books. The Autopoiesis of Architecture, which is a 2-volume framework for architecture, and Parametricism 2.0, Rethinking Architecture's Agenda in the 21st Century. In addition to that, he has authored at least 100 theoretical and historical essays that have been published all over the world. He's kindly written for every one of the ADs I've ever done, but also other magazines, journals, books. And in addition to that, his work has been exhibited and has been held in numerous museum collections internationally. I don't even want to get into the numbers because they're incredibly intimidating. And, so every facet here, right? Practice I've described, award-winning projects I've described, authorship I've described. And in addition to that, academically, he started the Architectural Association Design Research Lab in 1996, right? So it's almost been around 25 years, and you know the reputation that program has. So I find it unbelievable. So in addition to being the director of the DRL, he's held many professorships, including the Portman Professorship at Harvard. And, Patrik, I can't thank you enough for making time to doing this. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing the struggles and tribulations and successes in the Lisa Tower. So with that, I'd like to welcome Patrik Schumacher. Thanks, Patrik.
Thanks a lot for the generous introduction. I'm happy to be here, happy to share some images and some ideas and stories about the Lisa Tower. So I guess I start by sharing my screen. Okay, here we go. Let's share that. Ali, I'm not sure how much time I have. Can you give me a hint?
Yeah, I'd like to keep it to 45 minutes, 50 minutes maximum, and then we can have a discussion. And there are lots of questions from the students and others who are watching. So, just to continue a discussion in a conversation style, right? But please go ahead and present as long as you need, Patrik, really.
Great. So is that image on screen?
Yes, for me it is.
Okay, great. I hope the connection is good enough because I have a video coming up next. I mean, this is a delicious project. It's a mature project, the 4th in a row with the client. And that is an important thing to mention, to build up the trust, to do extraordinary things, where you need a lot of commitment from many people, particularly, of course, a client who is putting up the financing, but also, of course, staff and engineering teams. But it's a beautiful, elegant piece. It works from the exterior into the interior. Of course, the interior is the main effect. And you mentioned the Portman professorship of Harvard, which, when Portman had sponsored a professorship, Mohsen Mustafavi, the dean of Harvard, remembered my passion for John Portman, which wasn't always understood, because for me it was about space and not about some kind of, let's say, details, which were sometimes, the kind of 70s tacky details. But he was a great innovator, a monumental innovator in terms of typology and space. And and that is of course pertinent because this mega atrium concept originates with John Portman, but it was used for hotels only, and therefore you had that great space, but then you would face a kind of wall of hotel rooms. And this is here brought into the idea of an office space, particular office space. It's a Soho means small home offices. These are not big corporate headquarters. They are clusters of thousands, hundreds at least, potentially even several hundred of small office ventures. And to bring that concept to this domain was something new and novel. That means you have not, and the fact that the atrium isn't interiorized, but is also opens up into the urban space. And that is all about inter-visibility, inter-awareness into the urban and within the building. So I start with this video, I hope that runs. Bit of music, I switched it off. Yeah, it is about that experience on the inside, and of course it's also deliciously made. And the way you get the anticipation of that interior space. So it is about an experience, about a social congregation which has an image and the phenomenology and the presence. And I will tell you how we got there. I mean, these are the 3 other projects we've done for Soho, 2 in Beijing and then 1 in Shanghai as well. And some of the themes go through, to create a kind of large building, which is basically a cluster of multiple buildings connected with bridges and podiums. And, with respect to Galaxy, maybe the best of the 3, you get already, basically you have a series of atriums, actually 4 atriums on the inside, but you get the largest, the big one is that exterior inverted commas atrium, which is also open to the urban space and has bridge connections. So that already gives you an anticipation. Of course, this isn't, Lisa is kind of 4 times as high or more, with 200 meter and another level. But we've built up a kind of brand identity also for Soho, and we've established a track record of delivering complex building, where we also use complex geometry to enhance the overall presence and also to the overall intervisibility and navigability and orientation capacity of these buildings. And I think that comes through here. So you can see here, these are already photos of the final product, and the way the light pours through, you can see right through the building, a series of bridges which we need structurally, but they also become connections, and the idea of the twist, will come to that. It's actually has to do, the cut is also the cut in the underground where railway is cutting through, and then the twist of course delivers a beautiful dynamic and also gives this kind of waveform into the faces, which would otherwise be, let's say, flat. You get more tilting into view some areas, and you get more view enhancement, intervisibility enhancement through this, as well as the beautiful plasticity of the object. And but also the train cuts in at a diagonal, and the twist aligns the void with the street axis. Actually, something we have done also less extreme without a full atrium in our tower for City Life. There you see there's a kind of expressed cut where the core between 2 half of a core, and there's also a twist which aligns on axis. To look for these monumental expansions of the object itself through context embedding. I'm showing this also. We'll have to show that the way we design now is we have complete models, fully detailed BIM models, and then we can render photorealistically and really anticipate what we're getting. So on the right hand side, this is a rendering, and if you later on see the photos, it is nearly indistinguishable. So that capacity to anticipate, knowing what you're doing, knowing what you want to deliver, and homing in on various design decisions also through that. And sometimes renderings are dismissed as something kind of, it's about selling a commercial. No, rendering means you know what you're doing. And I have to say that Ali, you are the one who is, for me, was the first one to push rendering to that extent within the discourse of architecture with your Nike Shanghai project. And it was great because a lot of people took it as a built work, and but you brought it home, so with a tangible sensation and knowing what you're doing with every detail, with surfaces, with reflection. And I think in terms of the discourse of architecture, they can stand in and substitute for. If somewhere else you have demonstrated that this is actually feasible technologically. So here there's, a series of other, this is actually the photograph, and these are early sketch renderings and not the final. And anyway, so the intentions were clear already in these. This kind of a vortex space, which is amazing, and with the light pouring in and view, but then also in your own level, the open floors, the way they interface across, the way the tilts allow you sometimes to look at floors above you. Another direction tilt allows you to be more pulled in with the floors below you. You are in whether in which direction you are, you more connect downwards or upwards, and the view into the urban space. And I think this is not, of course, a two-way view. When you approach the building, you already get the sense of its activity, its life, and it creates a desire to join, be part of it. And that's very important because these are co-location synergy clusters. And we made the experience of Soho, but also in our building in Russia, particularly also where we have a big atrium. In any way, we go, these buildings, they just draw together people with a sensibility, with an ambition, with a sense of the future. This is actually also a lot of tech startups and so on coming to our buildings. There's a 5G lab. That's very important. That is certain. And other buildings, which are kind of traditional stone buildings, so on, they will get another kind of cluster of firms. So the way we find each other through our stylistic and fashion signaling in a party, in an urban related kind of congenial firms, and maybe also residents would find each other around the projected sensibility and identity. I think this is an important work also of the aesthetics you project. So here we're going in some of this kind of amazing play of light and shadow, the kind of modulation, the plasticity. That's the way you get kind of visceral sense of the object you're entering, and that means orientation becomes clearer. It's not kind of abstracted away into something. And as you move, things pull into view and slip out of view. So it's more dynamic. It's more, let's say, in parametrism, I talk also about observer parameters. So it's very sensitive to position. So the element, the piece keeps shifting its character and revealing and concealing as you shift around it. And I think this is important. Just to see how this, when it's kind of started to happen, the excitement of seeing those structures going up. And I mean, we'll talk later more about the facade. The facade is a kind of gradient transformation. It's actually a shingle facade, which gives this kind of nice kind of rhythm, but it also has the function of opening a mechanical vent point. And then it kind of flattens out when it becomes a kind of a flat sheet of glass in front of the atrium. And then it kind of thickens out. And I noticed there's something you learn from, I was in Nanjing, SOM did this hotel where they had, curves, and they went for the shingle solution. And I realized the shingle solution, also this kind of nice translation from floor to floor. You can use, you know, similar, more close elements, and there's a sliding on the verticals. But also you get, instead of an attempt to make a curve with a flat sheet, you get something more deliberate. The shingle means, yes, I want to be flat, but I'm in that kind of drift of, and it's beautiful because it's, again, different from different sides, and you'll see later on the close-ups. Very important that facades, in my view, have a relief oftentimes, and that they're sensitive to angles. So this was just when it comes to the pure space, the pure structure. I mean, these are two, so that there is a core, and I've always been with DRL studying building towers without cores, and have open panoramic elevators and so on. Here we do have a core, but if the core is usually massive and would obscure the relations inside the building on each floor, and of course across floor. You have no communication, no intervisibility, so that you would disappear in an elevator, and then you have thousands of people in the building you're totally unaware of. You're just in your little cell down a corridor. You don't even know who else is on the floor. So that is highly problematic in network society. And it's also, why are you coming to the place in the first time? You might as well stay home. As we know now, that you can, joining in means literally you have to be part of something, a network. And so that needs to be these spaces of gathering. And it might be only visual, inter-awareness through intervisibility. Okay, so here you can see a little bit the way these large, flat, these highly transparent facade, and then it starts to transition into a little bit relief, and then it builds up the relief to the edge. And yeah, they're doing construction. So it's a thrill to pick up these images and see the thing coming up, and you see how the towers is 200 meters, and the two halves would be very fragile in terms of their proportions, and that's where the bridges coming in. But I think the bridges are an interesting and nice feature. Also, if you kind of move through them and you get and experience the space. There's been issues. In terms of what one would have wanted. There's been issues in terms of security and fire, which we're still working on for mega atriums, in terms of sealing this, in terms of allowing some of the more open spaces into that space of, I wanted to pull in back the facade and a lot of floors, and you can step out or circulate in the atrium. And what came across were two things: fire, but also I'm not sure if it's particularly relevant in China, with a lot of work stress, might be similar in Japan, the kind of threat of suicide. So in terms of one of the battles I've lost is to have more occupation in, let's say, out in the space. And maybe it's the kind of vision the Knight McLean had, and it only needs one person to kind of take a jump. And I can understand. I've been in high places, and particularly something delicious like this, which is otherworldly, that you might not even be depressive. You might just do it. So that was a debate, a kind of a struggle and debate I had and lost with the client. I wanted more of that. I said, no, come on, this is not realistic. And no, but so there was this. So it's more of you can't step out, you can't kill yourself in this space. Anyway, so here we are. I wanted to go a bit more to the location and the in Beijing. The Beijingers know obviously where it is and what it is. It's actually en route to the airport. It's beautiful that it is connected to our airport. They actually will be now, and we've been competing for that, a check-in. You take the trains, it's intersection of two train lines, and you drive here and you check into the Dashing airport already, and then you take the kind of airport express from there. So it's a direct connection with the airport, as the intersection of these let's say two train lines, and that matters for the idea of the project. So I wanted the mega atrium anyway, And I had talked to Zhang Xing, the owner of Soho, when we did, you know, some of the other projects which have atria, in particular Galaxy. And as I said, I was with John Portman, and he actually came to our review at the GSD. And so I was developing the idea of the mega atrium, and I wanted to do it, and Shang Tsing knew about it, and I got her to hooked on that. But then we had the additional thing that the train would cut through here, and we actually can't have the core in the center anyway. And now we're doing a lot of towers with off-center cores, for instance, the new Hong Kong Tower and some others. And then you could have the whole core off-center and then get a big floor plate. But we used it here to say, okay, we split the core and set up the atrium. So that's a motivator. I mean, I would have done a mega atrium anyway. But this was a good motivator also for her to see we have to anyway split the core. Let's split the whole building, and then you can see that the direction of the atrium changes to align with the urban grid. So there is rationality in that, from diagonal to alignment, and then you get these beautiful surfaces, and also the idea of opening that window. Now the building is very complex. It's not a cylinder. It's not even the footprint is not a circle. It is an oval. It stretches an elliptoid, which then as you go up, the elevation is also changing, swelling up. That's why the window also can open up more, and you get more deeper space, and then it kind of closes in a bit more again at the top. So it is a highly complex, and in the end, every panel, for instance, is unique. There's no repetition. I mean, there's self-similarity, but there is no repetition in this, because you get each floor is different. And then also as you go around, swing around, you have this modulation of the relief from flat to quite deeply projected. Some of the programming, and actually we have a sunken kind of retail condition. So there's also the interesting relationship with the ground to going negative. And at the top we have also a helipad. So some kind of communication coming in from the top, similar to Miami Tower where we have that. And you can see it goes quite down with escalators into the connecting with retail into the train levels. So it's a real, a TOD kind of central node in a TOD. There's a whole finance cluster now building around that. So it's a fulcrum of a whole new, let's say, business district at that intersection, connecting up with the airport in the south of Beijing. So here you can see some of these sunken plaza conditions, landscaping, the skylight is sheared atrium and the helipad and some solar. And it's beautiful. I mean, we don't see anything of this sticking out. A lot of times, these equipment and so on is plugged on towers and gives it a kind of. It suddenly the image gets out of hand for the architect, and something else takes over. We could avoid that here because we have energy centers and we have plant floors, and we don't pack it up on the top of the floor, where there's always a pretense of being able to hide it, and it usually never can. So this is where that ground floor space is very, very generous and open with a series of escalators up and down, etc. And the two cores. So the cores, you see that as the building swells, you get a lot more area behind the core and in front. So you get more generous floor plates. Anyway, I don't want to go too long on these and go more to the details we've developed. So this is the ground floor, and as we move up, so that's the whole You can see how much area we're generating around the course. Now the course become quite small, and there's an enormous amount of open area and a lot of, you can cross over the void as well, and there's a lot of intervisibility, which captures nearly most of the floor plates. And there's always going to be some which want to be a little bit more separated off, but it's mostly open office. So I think it's a very lovely floor plate. I mean, and usually that towers have the most boring floor plates, because you see all this beautiful complexity in that form, and the changing depths. You can have something quite deep and large here, etc. So that's sometimes variation is a nice default, and now it gives various places for the various segments of an organization or firm to settle in, rather than having just one donut where everything is the same. And so you see here, this is all kind of fully modeled and laid out and played out and visualized in terms of the open office plan and the vistas across. I mean, knowing what we're doing, and the client demands certainty. They demand, of course, also a construction cost certainty and time certainty, and that's why we must, for anybody to buy into this and dare going with this, must trust the organization and must trust the technical capacity which can handle these issues. And that's what what we're doing. These are the big kind of unitary systems, the big cassettes. You see the depths of the shingle, and each item is kind of understood. This is the kind of, let's say, generative components, power detailing, where you map it out and you develop the parametric piece and the way the element adjusts to the various locations. And in the end, it all fits perfectly. I mean, it is a logistical and technical feat, which before these kind of computational processes would be a 100-fold explosion of cost, simply undoable. And now it is doable. As you know, Soho China is not the client who's working for the big corporates. It's not the kind of budget Foster has for Apple. Way far away from that. This is really budgetary-wise competitive, because it is for the smaller companies who don't have that luxury. And I think it's also important to realize that. So there's a lot of rationalization, a lot of tough negotiations, and also with suppliers, competitive bids, and competitive creation of mock-ups. So here we get the engineering coming in for the plates, for the bridges, for the cores, and so on. This is the columns. I mean, it's in itself. Some of these diagrams and forms are beautiful. You'll never see them. They're not been articulated or made prominent, but it's there. And I always say, I mean, we need to care about. We can't allow behind the facade a kind of structural wild goose chase of forces and hatchet jobs. Because in the end, it will come through one way or another, and will spoil the feeling. And I even believe in the beauty of artifacts during construction, because that gives the anticipation and so on, and keeps the motivation going. And then there's, of course, the integration of services. So important is, in particular in fast track, we had so many projects in China where you have where this isn't integrated early enough, where suddenly structural beams come down and you have to box around them, or you have to redo all your surfaces late in the game, or M&E all over the place. I mean, we had another project, which in the end eats up all the profit. So early kind of integration, to insist on that is incredibly important. So that's also why we had our LDI engineering kind of group lined up from previous projects as well. Yeah, each segment, I mean, it's a complex object, is beautiful in a way, and I think that's important. And everything is in a kind of grasshopper definition, and all the steel works, and then the integration of everything. So this is a few before construction we did some of these mock-ups to see the transparency, to see some of the relief. I mean, this is not the final. The shifts, I mean, that it looked in the final we came out more beautiful than this, and the black color. Now, this was another struggle I had. I wanted Wanjing already. I wanted to have black, gray, and white, or silver, gray, and black, and there's something about black where the client initially was resisting it. It took a lot of arm twisting and creating samples and associations and showing the potential beauty of a black, and the elegance of a black building, inside and outside black. I mean, there was an enormous amount of resistance. More the scare that it might not sell. And I said, you have, but also I thought it was very important for this petite piece to not be another white metal, and you can see later that it works. It unifies the glass with the aluminum into something much more subtle, because glass mostly appears black anyway, where there's space behind it, and then you do the lace of lines. Also, even if you have this kind of atrium from the outside, I've seen it too many times where we got frustrated. We didn't do, for instance, black mullions at the aquatic center, and the grid becomes too strong, etc., etc. And from the inside, anyway, even a white profile would appear black. So it was. I had a number of clients. It's an important aspect of this building, also differentiated against the previous works we had. And we had so we have these two white buildings in Beijing. In Shanghai, we went for more kind of silver and gray. But we made the mistake in Shanghai that we had the curtain wall flattened, and we didn't express the mullion, and that lacks subtleness of, there's observer parameters are not activated. There's no relief, so I insisted here on the relief. But it's very interesting the way how slick the buildings, how polished it appears in some views, and how kind of feathered or ripped it looks from others. And sometimes you get this beautiful kind of transparency, particularly mid-level kind of helicopter shot. That would be from another building, as the buildings around it build up, you get these views. And that's intervisibility between the two halves of the building and between, the next set of buildings. And you can see where the party is going on, and you just move across the road or across the plaza and join. So here, these kind of views quite fabulous. So sometimes you get a lot of this play of reflection and the kind of migration of the shingles. I think it's very kind of beautiful. It's more a subtle surface. It's a delicious sensation, the way the light comes through these kind of dawn and dusk, twilight light conditions are often actually quite interesting, and they're there. The building lives through the different conditions of a day. These are some of the shots I created, so you don't need to be kind of expert photographer, this is what you perceive, this is what you get when you approach, and these are the shots I did with my iPhone myself. And it's lovely the way the buildings behind us kind of reflect the way you, and then it's very important that you get these shots right through. Would there be another building, you would have it here. But also that the transparency comes through, but of course only where the two openings align with your view. And again, that's not a boring breach. It's a kind of, that twist helps here to keep migrating that, let's say, through shot, visual through shot. Yeah, I think these are kind of the layeredness is beautiful, and that's even before life has moved into the building. And yeah, so there's a lot of interest, I think, in the objects, which I think is just, it's about stimulating, making something dynamic, making something refined in its variation, and then you can imagine that it offers different and varied conditions on the inside, different situations for you to participate in. Yeah, here you can get the sense how strong the relief becomes. And I love these big kind of trusses crossing, and if somebody standing there walking through it, that's the thrill. It reminds me of the kind of grand Central Station in Manhattan. It's always been stimulating, that kind of inhabited facade. And I mean, this is not my shot. I can't claim that. Photographer coming in, I mean, I don't know, is it a drone or is it from the tower opposite? Actually, I don't know, but the waiting, but the sun pours through the building. I mean, I think that's amazing. Or reflecting off it, I don't even know. There's some kind of stunning shots, and that's always when you have the real. I mean, but you could have also pre-rendered that, and work with these possibilities. But so far, of course, there's always the final surprises and thrills when you have a building of that complexity. And this one, I love that too. I mean, it's just amazing, the way the sky is reflecting, and the way the sun glows on these black metal surfaces, and the way it builds up into a near solid here, and these kind of migrating lines, and all of that needs to be tested, can be tested, and if you look the other way, it's a totally different view. And this is what I find thrilling, and where one would have this kind of multi-facedness of an object, depending from how you approach it, where you're approaching it, from where you're seeing it, if you look up, if you look down, and then also we're moving inside, and again, the bridges, the views across. You from each side, there's quite a few levels. I mean, I think you need 20 levels relatively. You get a sense of its occupation, of what's going on, of its later on interiors. You imagine these will be inhabited by various brands, which will put in some of their own ceilings and some of them. And that liveliness, I don't mind. There will be always Soho had that in appearing even in the facade on the outside. Where was the hair salon? Where's the various types of offices, retails. There will be no residences here, but that was the original Soho, that you could also have residences mixing in. And again, there's a few more views of this. This is an amazing shot. I mean, this is a kind of early evening looking up photo. I mean, it's just, it's so beautiful. It's so thrilling. I mean, that is what you get, let's say, when you're the last one to leave at kind of 9 o'clock or something. And to do that kind of space for commercial working horse building, I mean, that's important. That is not something you need to only do for, you know, twice a year, the opera experience or something where you kind of step out. This is kind of daily life thrills, or a lot of visitors coming to your place, coming to your office and inviting you into that experience. I think that's just uplifting, thrill, energizing. I mean, that's important, I think, for the working environment, for the everyday. The everyday becomes kind of uplifted. It's a pleasure to go to work. And of course, we if we do the interiors of these offices and some of the lobbies and so on, you get that sense. You get this visceral sense of being part of the future and working for the future. And that's what a lot of these companies are doing, imagining the future. And this is some of my own kind of shots again. And the way you look across the floors from one side to another, and when you look down from your floor to other floors into the urban. So my shots, and this is one of the interiors we generated with so-called 4G lab, and it's actually an exhibition of new media conditions. And I can imagine kind of hundreds of different and hopefully congenial 21st century interiors, which you can experience in such a building. So I just leave you again with that little film. And I wanted to, so that's Lise. I just wanted to contextualize it a little bit. If you let me, Ali.
Okay, sure.
Because that's just the beginning for me of the mega atrium story. And so just, I've shown these around. These are bigger visions of something like that. That is for a sketch for a huge kind of building, a headquarters building for Hyundai. And headquarters, of course, is another one, more integrated than you would have with the cluster of independent companies. So these are some of the visions we generated for other competitions. We then went on to Taikang to propose something, which is, we have another different version, which is more exteriorized, the atrium. But we've done other versions of this kind of world with mixed use and multi-use, with retail, hotel, and offices. So, and finally, so these were competitions, and this is the next one we're actually doing. It's not so much the mega atrium, it's a cluster of towers. There's transparency, but there is big atrium carve-outs as well. And if you don't go, 200 meters, but you only go, I don't know how many meters that is, let's say 40 meters or something, or 50 meters, 60 meters, then you also have less scare factor and fire issues, and you actually can do it. So that's what we're doing right now for Oppo in Shenzhen. And here we're going actually with literally being in the atrium openly. And you'll see how this pans out if that can be done. But that's what we're doing. We're in SD with that already. And open floor plans with a series of smaller atrium, but still you can see here with the pulling it to the facade and to get that fantastic vista into the urban, which is different from having it only from one floor where you have to kind of move your nose to the facade to have it. Here you can kind of be in a space and see that, and with some fantastic top of tower. So so it's not the end of a story, it's the beginning, I think, of a new crop of high-rise buildings, which are learned a lot from the kind of things we've done more in closer to ground kind of spaces, because I believe that working spaces become more like cultural spaces. They're about networking, interaction, having meetings and events rather than putting your head down in a cell. So it's a new crop of towers, and it's a kind of Portman on 2.0, because it's not only hotel, it's gonna be, and we have a few others in the works right now, which I can show you. So these are the themes we're working on, and as you know, we're working on also on structure. So the next thing would be how these things become more expressive structure together with this even more integrated in these buildings. So they're far from the final apotheosis. They're part of a pathway into something which I'm still thrilled. Topping up, there's always another level. So that's what we're working on.
Patrik, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for that, for the talk. And I really...
So that was what I had to say, Ali.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Really, I love that.
I think you're muted, Ali.
Oh, am I? I don't think I am.
No, anyway. No, I had muted you. Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks a lot, Patrik, for muting me. But I really enjoyed the talk, and I think it's fantastic to see the work in the context, like you spun it out, right? Showing that it's part of a larger framework, starting from all the Soho projects in China to now some of the work in Korea as well as in Shenzhen, to just show the students and explain that this is design research that's taken years to manifest, right? So it's not a kind of a one-off idea. It's not like, okay, I had this idea and now let's do it. It's not. It's sort of an iterative project to project, building up the layers, the intricacies, the materiality, the details, the way of thinking about fireproofing, and how you use digital technologies to help you actually visualize the built form. All of these techniques that have been developed over the years. I mean, one manifestation of it is Lisa, but it's going to, from what I'm hearing, it's going to get more and more interesting and better as you move along. I just want to focus on Lisa for a little bit, Patrik, because I think that, you talk about Portman a lot, and I love Portman as well. And I think what's fascinating about it and how you described it was the plasticity of the interiority, right? And how it sort of produces an incredible effect, sort of a visual sensation that is unbelievable. But in addition to that, what Portman does, for example, in the Renaissance Center in Detroit, is the plasticity of the exterior, right? And it's where the surface just kind of shrink wraps onto a form. And what I think is interesting about the relationship between your building and, say, the Renaissance Center and Portman's work is how you also connect it to a TOD site. I guess that's not played enough. When it's published, when Lisa is published, you only see the exterior above ground work. Yeah. But the connectivity to the subway and how the structure has to interface with those conditions, and the realization that the program turns into becoming commercial, and these direct connections is Portman's legacy, right? He brought in the notion of sort of retail into the tower and into the base of a building, which hadn't been done before him. So I find these sorts of movements in sort of complex conditions that you've showed us and how they've been resolved to such an effortless manner, I find it very exciting. It's much more interesting having you describe and show the trials and tribulations as you move through the process than just seeing the work published. So I think it's been really helpful for me and the students for sure. There are some students, by the way, who are working on Portman's thing, so I'm sure they've learned a lot. Maybe they'll ask questions as well. The one thing I wanted to say to you, just as a friend, Patrik, is that I find exactly what you find about your facade the most interesting. I find when I first saw those photographs, I was looking at that, at the shingles, what you call the relief, the shingles, the way, the feathering of the surfaces. I find that incredibly beautiful, but it's also, I think, pushing the discourse of your previous projects to a different level, right? Especially the surface exterior projects now has this incredible texture that you're highly in control of. And why I say that, and the students need to kind of understand this, is when you showed that mock-up, the mock-up, I mean, it's a massive mock-up. It's 2 stories of the actual building, right? And then when you see the final result, I think it's developed much further than the mock-up. You know, I like the straightness of the panelization. I like how it's resisting everything just being at a diagonal. There are certain decisions that were made which I think enhanced the project tremendously, particularly from its exteriority. And as we know, this is the tallest atrium in the world. So I don't think you can do better than that. But all the issues of fireproofing and codes and all the work that you had to do to convince the building department in Beijing to build this thing, that's also something that's kind of, an attribute towards your dedication in pulling a project like this off. So thanks a lot for that. I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on it. Look, I want to open this up to questions, either from the panelists that include our students or from the outside. Maybe I should ask you a question, Patrik. What did you find out of all of the issues that you described? What did you find was the most difficult within the design process or its manifestation and construction on Lisa? Was there one? I mean, the whole thing must have been very difficult, but was there one factor that just sticks out in your mind? And if there is, what would that be?
Well, I was worried a lot about the degree of intervisibility we're achieving. I mean, as I said, I wanted more direct occupation, but in the end it came through. I mean, also was worried about the materiality on the inside. We had various ideas. And in the end, I think we did the right thing to make it more monolithic with the exterior. And rather than having, we were experimenting with other, with the contrasting color or material. Even I looked at timber. When I went to the opposite house in Beijing, and I saw these kind of very rough timber corridors. I said, maybe we can work with a contrast like this. And it wasn't unfeasible for fire reasons, for other reasons. But so there was a lot of kind of thinking and struggling. In the end, we went to kind of step back and say, okay, no, let's keep with the black aluminum. And there was always a kind of fight again with how dark we can make that. And it was kind of we had it on the building, and on the interior it came again. And it's not full on black. It's actually kind of dark gray. But then you can see through the light, it actually becomes already a different surface. And the way we lit it, and the way the light pours out of the offices, and the way the relief there helps. You get some kind of reflection, color reflection on these soffits. So that worked out. It actually, in some instances, you can make it quite different. And in other instances, it's more monolithic, let's say, with the outside. So that was it was a struggle with the client again, but also was an internal struggle with knowing what we want. So we modeled quite a few different things. I don't have variations and variants. The other thing was at one point, and I'm glad we didn't do it, I thought that might be more subtle if we would get run the shingling across even the void. So you get something more homogeneous on the outside, and it would only be through the light which pours through. I think it was an interesting version, could have been an interesting version. But then suddenly when you see, okay, but you also give up something, because you give up that, you gain some mystery, but you give up this kind of fantastic vista out. Yeah. Because it was very heavy, filling in that void suddenly, to see the shingles basically from the inside. Yeah. So these are decisions where you have to. There was a number of those internal struggles with my own self, what I would want, what I would like to see. And so, but I'm happy with the decision we made. I mean, like, look, I don't want to go into things which I'm not 100%. I mean, there was this idea of how to stop this, and I wanted to just drive it down, and it isn't doing that right now. It's doing something else. It clears up on the ground differently. So maybe I was more in. So it's not in every point, and again, it's maybe some of these things also then come too late. You can imagine that I'm not only working on one project, and I'm kind of thinking in phases on this. In the meantime, things, but also the thing is, oftentimes clients get wedded to early articulations, and then you can't get them away from that. So I was always fascinated by the Stirling Tower in New York, where there's no articulation. The tower just the surface just go down, and you have this kind of sunken thing. And we have an articulated interface with the ground. And I thought in this case we just let it run it down into the kind of void and into the ground there. But it's not major, and I'm glad that we could have made major mistakes. For instance, bring the shingles across the main thing. I think we would have lost too much, while we've gained some. So these are a lot of that. What I'm going through in, let's say, in trying to see and what the thrill and stimulations and effects one could go for, and there's always options there. And so I'm, and that's and factor is very important. I mean, I'm whether you go with glossy or satin on a steel element. I mean, it's kind of heart wringing, but it matters, because in one case you got a lot of this kind of reflection and glare and hot spots on it. Another one is it gives you it's a diffuse kind of silhouette. So these things do matter, and
absolutely. These are details that really can change the effect, not only in the building but also on the city, right?
You need to also be always on the run, because we're not only having the object in isolation. It's with respect to all the things you've seen. And you have to watch out, and building takes a number of years. So there's also the kind of consumption of aesthetic innovations and stimulations. So that and we want to do something that's we're going to resist sometimes something which is en vogue. And if you come at the end of this and there's a risk of triviality, and to look for strangeness for something really new, or then kind of step back and do the kind of timeless. And that's also important to have that going. And there's certainly what works a lot, or what is for me a huge resource, is continuously to query my own kind of aesthetic, learning from what I'm seeing. And it's not necessarily only buildings from famous people. I'm continuously studying how these facades are ordered, how these layers are done, and what's the effect, and what do I like about it, why I'm attracted to this, what is the kind of recipe behind that. And so that's the way I'm walking around the city. And of course, in London, you have some fantastic work. I mean, where you can have your the aspirations and the competitors, what you have to match and beat or come close to. When you look at some of the Richard Rogers building, for instance, and where you go beyond it already. And so that's for me very important. I'm not sure if the students are doing this, but that one has kind of references, and that one enters into a network or into a kind of field of stimulations and references and aesthetic.
I find this discussion incredible, Patrick, because that's one thing I try and teach my students is just literally, how do you see? What do you see? When you walk around the city, what are you looking at? How are you looking at it? And what are the sort of the details that are popping out to you, right? So in their own work, they can establish those relationships. Otherwise, you take them to a site and they just look at it as if they're tourists, They have no way of understanding what the effects are that they're being excited by and how they're produced, how those are precisely produced, right? So that is fantastic. And I love that you described that. I have two questions for you that popped to mind just from your discussion. One, I love the move to dark gray, by the way, in Lisa, right? I think it's fantastic. The second, and it's the first project in China, coming from two buildings in any case in Beijing that are white to one that's dark gray. I mean, that move is a huge move, right? Usually it would take a couple of buildings to get to that color, but you guys just went inverse. So I want to hear a little bit about that. And secondly, I want to hear a little bit about the relationship that you just so described about saying a monolithic exterior on Lisa that would not show the void from the outside. And what my question to you is that in the project for Oppo, when you actually move the facade off the interior facade, you're going to have to now look through two facades. And I know in your project, you're going to have a lot of detail because you're moving the work towards that. Now, when I go into the Shanghai Tower and you look through two planes of glass, which has no detail to it at all, it's just really surface, it's problematic. I still can't see through it, So I'm just wondering if you've thought about those issues. I'm sure you have, but anyway, I just want to throw it back to you.
No, I mean, actually in Oppo, we're going for a single facade.
Okay. So there's no
and that's of course a huge challenge. But what we still have to do and want to do is we're going to work with the margin extrusions. So we want to bring shading in. And I was studying another layer of shading, let's say, figures, swarms of birds settling where they should be settling, or extrusions, because we can't leave it a total greenhouse, and we don't want to. So that's one thing we're working on. Let's see, but it's a single, in terms of the glass, it's a single facade. Yeah, the Shanghai Tower has this double layer. I actually find it quite interesting what it does to the profile. Yeah. And I tried to get inside. I was at the ground floor and they wouldn't let us up. I wanted to see what it feels like on the floors, and these kind of voids, and when you're at the bottom of them, and how much use can you make of those spaces. But I think it's interesting.
They're actually filled with structure.
The layeredness. It's quite a choice. It's not always clear what is more expensive. We have double facades, for instance, in our MAXXI Tower in one area, except for the central, where the meeting rooms are. It's a single. And there we had to then go also for darker glass because of because we didn't have the shading and the kind of plenum void. And that then shows up as darker glass, and as well we have it in the Milan Tower. We have a double facade. It frees up the exterior. It makes the exterior more cheaper, but then you have to invest into an interior facade. But you can use it for venting and getting rid of hot. You cool that double layer. So it's effective as a filter, but of course it reduces quite a bit the connection you get with the exterior when you always have these two layers. And so we have in the corridor, which is aligned with the axis in the top end of the twist. We have single glass. I mean in the Milan Tower. So And we have some double facades, but not always everywhere in the building, in our other towers. Yeah, it's fascinating because you have to. There's a lot of technical constraints and arguments you could use, but there's of course an artistic project which is to do with this, let's say, the social situation and the way you want to communicate them, and an identity and a sense of self and a sense of, let's say, time and progressiveness through the work. And that's what we what we really care about, I guess. But you do want to also feel that and know that we're not unnecessarily burning, huge amounts of energy in our buildings. So that is a genuine kind of concern, because you also, that knowledge feeds back into an discomfort. So that's something where we also want to do, so that the technical issues, if they also become kind of part of what you sense through knowledge. It's not only pure visuality.
Yeah, of course. And what about the white-black move, Patrik? How did that happen?
The black, I was clear. Is and you oftentimes we know, of course, that the white would gives you the strongest light shadow relief. Yeah. But it's not only that we had two white buildings. It's cleanliness. It's elegance, and also what we wanted this one to mean. We also wanted to be a bit more austere, mysterious, and the way we did it. I've created this kind of association. So I was talking about which car would you buy with the black limousines, the black leather, the shades, all these, the whole kind of set of references, black granite, black lacquered piano, and all the things which are black and beautiful. That was, I created that portfolio of black as an aspect of of elegance, of timelessness, of beauty, so that's the way I got it across. And
I love that. I think it's a good move, and especially in Beijing, where everything becomes kind of yellow with the dust.
Yellow,
it gets layered with all of this.
And also said, to mark this off again from that it's not a kind of routine exercise. And
I have a question here from Tong again. She's the one who's actually working on the Portman project this semester. She would like to know the differences, so the experiential details versus the scale. So it's the scale of detail at the facade and how it responds to the city versus the scale of detail for the interiority and how it operates for the individual. How do you think about those sorts of issues in Lisa?
Yeah, actually, the overall effect. Oh, wait. Sorry, I will call back later. In a building like this, you're rarely alone with a single detail. You always see them kind of migrating and fading into the background. So its detail is kind of relief. It's not divorced from the overall. But also what is important when you get close is execution. Mm-hmm. And that's again something which I noticed, in particular if you go into complex geometry, execution matters for the feeling, because you don't see it, you see it in the close, and then you kind of project it across the whole. And if there is kind of chaos or disfiguredness and the amorphous and unresolved confronts you, and you project it across the whole, this could be kind of menacing and could spoil. I mean, the important thing is also the way you control all the views and all the experiences. I often say, one wrong vista, one wrong thing could spoil. I mean, it's like a speck or a spit on your immaculate outfit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one, unfortunately. You can make a lot of effort and then you kind of spoil it in the in the last minute, because it's difficult to get rid of this, and because for me, aesthetic, this idea of elegance and resolvedness, and perfection is trust in performance as well, and trust in the institution, trust in the building, that things are where they should be and things are functioning as they should be. And and that was the problem with the Guangzhou Opera House in terms of the execution. And it's great if you come at evening, at night, and it's just a transformative building. But if you come during the day, and you're kind of confronted with these issues, I'm not sure if you can actually forget them when you come the next night. So that's where detail and close-up comes in as well. You need to be able to resolve it. And sometimes, I mean, in our early days, we wanted this complexity so much and we didn't know if we can do it, and maybe how to do it, and then under time pressure. So if we didn't get it right, then I wish we had lowered our let's say ambitions, because that's not right. That is a letdown a little bit. I mean, again, you can make great photos of the opera house and you can have a great night out if you never go there during the day.
Right. That's interesting.
So it's a bit kind of, I don't want to say this, it's everybody knows that now in the world of
understood, but Patrik,
yeah.
But I think that you're underplaying it a little bit. Okay, so the cumulative detail is what you're referring to, right? So when you look through that atrium, you get a particular effect. But when you're on a floor and you're looking across to the other floor, right? You see the detail on the balcony. You see how there is detail.
Yeah, but there's not much in this building. There isn't much, let's say, what a close-up detail. It's more the overall migration. If you look across, you actually what we're looking at, you actually see deep into the floor and you see the silhouettes walking. It's not the kind of Escarpa thing where it's a jewel. No, it never is this. It's never is this.
But I understand that.
Although I know
you have more detail on the balcony than you do in Soho, for example.
It's more about avoiding the glitch. So it's actually strictly minimalist in it when it comes to close up. It's not the Scarpa thing. It's not the the close up touch and close up jewelry thrill. It's more how the details. I mean, they're minimal in their close up, but they're meaningful and non-maximal in their, let's say, as they generate span up surfaces, and the way the relief is played out and so on, and the way light is allowed to play. But comes back to, as I said, I mean, therefore, what we look at in terms of the close-up, what we need to avoid is flaws or where suddenly it feels cheap or something, or feels unsafe nearly.
There are a couple more questions here, Patrik.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, one which I think you're very invested in, just because of the work you've been doing in the DRL for years, has been a question about structure and how much you take on structural design and where it kind of falls into the process through kind of your design process and thinking. Can you just reflect on that for a little bit, please?
Yeah, it wasn't a big theme here. It wasn't, here was the space. And I mean, we have projects, I mean, let's say, obviously where we have structure is playing a more outwardly, you know, and visible and expressive role, like in the Miami Tower.
Yeah.
Because it's part of the transformation. And there's some interesting spaces, but also, I mean, the interesting migrations of the way the structure lightens up, the way the triangulation is embedded, the way it sets up the different types of flats, and the way the column splits at the top, and all of that. So that's one. And Morpheus, you know, the exoskeleton. There's also very interesting atrium. The atrium in Morpheus is of course different. It's much more pulsate. It's much more different. You're going through a series of different pieces of it. You know, the big lower atrium, then you're pulling into mid-level between bridges, and then you're pulling up at the top. That's also directly from Portman. I mean, it's not the big Portman gesture. It's more the Marriott New York,
Yeah.
where there's a series of segments,
yeah,
which of experiences. And we actually in Morpheus, we literally have the panoramic elevators, where you kind of zooming up the kind of vertical street condition, and you literally over the restaurant, over the breakfasts, and then again also you disappear and reappear in the top pool atrium space, right. Kind of. So that's a different version, and here the skeleton is very expressive, also inside the spaces. So you have you in the room, you have the diagonals show you that you're in a special building. You're reminded continuously where you are.
Yeah.
And there is a bit different. The skeleton is relatively even though. I mean, again, one could do more in terms of differentiated from the bottom, middle to the top. It's relatively even, although the bottom is articulated differently, because you have to actually allow the cars to move in under and so on. So look, none of these projects is the final, you know, version. So Lise doesn't have structure. We have the trusses, but the structure isn't. I mean, you have these beautiful columns alignments, but they're not a theme. I mean, there's only so much you can blend in and articulate. It would be a different expression. Yeah. So the structure isn't a theme, isn't expressed.
But Patrik, though, I think that the structure in Lisa, the rings that hold the two sides together and apart simultaneously, those are super important for the project.
Right? I think so, but it's only a partial. That's only a partial. Let's say it's not the overall structure.
No, understood. But the way you've connected the.
No, I do like it. I mean, of course, originally we didn't have them. We had to have them, and then we were actually quite happy. It gives a certain structure and rhythm and the connection potential and so on. So we're quite happy with them. Yeah. And there's also on top of the bridge, you can go out. I mean, so these they are interesting, and they help to give a certain scale to the piece and so on. I mean, we could have also had it without. I mean, it's not. I have to admit that the structure isn't an integral, let's say, player in Lise as it is totally integral in let's say the Miami Tower.
Yeah.
And we have actually, we unfortunately have to tell you that, I mean, we had the period where we pushed every tower as a skeleton, express skeleton. Yeah. We lost most of these competitions. I mean, it's, I don't know what it is. It's also probably cost-wise, even though it is, in theory, you would have a differentiated structure, optimized structure, gives you an overall cost effectiveness, particularly can disburden the core.
Yeah.
You can save a lot of concrete because you actually have the outer surface is a more efficient surface to put stability than in a core, and you can free up the core. So I think this is, but if you want to do differentiated, articulated, differentiated form with structure, meaning serious steel plate or concrete where you build formwork like we do in our bridge pylons, we're not there. Maybe through 3D printed formwork. I mean, we tried as you know, in Miami, we had preformed lost formwork to pull this off, but we're not there. We're there much, the facade firms have geared up more for parametricism than maybe structure itself. So and for instance, in Morpheus, the structure itself, I was struggling for a long time to get the steel itself be what we're looking at. And, like we've done in Guangzhou, actually in Guangzhou, we did these fantastic, sand bed casts for every single joint, different joint. So you see directly the cast flower piece, junction piece and the steel. I don't know why and how that was possible through some kind of ancient technique, and cheap labor 20 years ago, whatever it was. But so in Morpheus we couldn't do it, and it's all been cladded up. Great cladding, but still there's no way that the steel manufacturer would have given us something which merits the kind of flow of forces, depicts it, in ways which you could expose and at the same time have a kind of refined luxury hotel. So there we pulled away a little bit, and I have to admit, out of the losing too many of these competitions. Yeah, and most in a similar, and I think eventually we'll come through with it again. We're not giving up. It's a bit like when we in the mid-90s we lost all the competitions, and we reduced our geometric fluidity back to Cincinnati, MAXXI, and Wolfsburg, and then 10 years later with Baku, Daemon, and let's say Changsha, we're back where we wanted to be. So I think that might also happen. But
that's also, Patrick, that's a very
structurally differentiated project, the tectonism, including structure.
That's a very important point, because there's one conversation I had with Zaha years ago where she said, just do one new idea per project. Don't try and put everything into every project, because you will stunt the development of your career. And I think she was talking through experience, right? Because she just tried to push all these ideas out really before the world was ready for them. So she pulled back, and then she kept going step by step by step. And you even described that from Soho, how you've gained the confidence of the client to now do what you really want to be doing, right? It takes so much time and so much work and effort. I think that's really great for students to hear.
I mean, we had to, for instance, it's not that we didn't try. So for Soho, Wangjing, the 3 towers, I had an exoskeleton there for quite a while, and then that disappeared. And we Nanjing, the twin towers.
Yeah,
there were exoskeleton versions or skeleton versions. It didn't. I couldn't. You can't always get everything you want. So it's not the end of the story, I promise you.
No, I understand that. The last question I want to leave you at, and this is a question that's being asked by a panelist, but also the one that I've always wanted, and we've had these conversations inside, but since it's recorded, I just want to hear you discuss the aesthetics of Lisa without the technique. Can you do that? Can you describe? You've talked about elegance. That I think you always pull it back to technique. Can you just describe what you mean by elegance, just purely formally?
Well,
and aesthetically?
no. Well, for me, it's not
Or
a
is it always
purely
high?
formal. For me, elegance, as you know, is the kind of
I know, but the question is not
elegant solution to a complex, difficult problem, where the kind of heart, where it appears effortless, but you know something special and difficult has been achieved, and that's because of the complexity which is resolved, elegantly resolved complexity. That's what I feel it is here, and that means, you know, all the subtleties of the floor plan, of the silhouette, the integration of the underground, and the alignment with the street, and the transformation from two radically different facades, how they blended and so on, to make it more seamless. And it's right that it wasn't. I didn't make it kind of all seamless by just running the curtain across, but it's seamless by having a kind of blending and migration of iteration and so on. So that's what all contributes to elegance, where it's not a hatchet job. It's not where you have, you know, you're pasting things together, let's say. So that's why deconstructivism could never be elegant, because deconstructivism is a raw hatchet job, collation. You know, it's a great, let's say, problem poser. Let's say deconstructivism is there to tell us what we need to do. We need to kind of join in. We need to collage into an environment, multiple function, multiple layers, multiple elements, and it posits an aesthetic problem, but it makes no step to any solution. And it's a hatchet job in a sense that it's, in terms of working through this, is dead easy. You just pile it in. You just throw another layer on, and initially there's a certain aesthetic to this which is thrilling, because it is more because of the sterility and monotony of what it substitutes for.
Right.
Kind of deadpan modernism of kind of
look, deconstruction.
But it's not. It's obviously everything but elegant. It's everything but formally resolved. It just generates a massive formal problem. And I think that was, and Zaha is the one who's always already moved out of that into, because what we've done, even before, you know, parametricism was on the horizon, before we had computers, while it still was meant to be all deconstructivism, she, and even before I joined and with us, we were working very, very hard to solve these formal problems. And basically, it took 95% of the work effort.
Well, you can see with the competition on the peak, right? You can see that she's really resolving it. Well, the others are just throwing things at it. It did play an important, right? I mean, that's what that deconstructivist show at the MoMA was all about. But I have to say,
you can see that Himmelblau is no such intention. They just want the aesthetic of the kind of steering wheel bursting through the kind of rib cage of the passenger. They want that car crash. Well, manifest.
But Patrik, but
you can't have a city of car crashes. I mean, that's menacing.
But you can look. Deconstructivism was important at the time it happened.
And the same is with Gary. Gary's house is obviously, let's say, it's a provocation. It's positing something, but it's also, you know, it's a kind of counter work. It's a counter architecture at that point. But it's a great provocation. But you can't generalize. Imagine you have this kind of because it denies architecture in the end. It is as if it's the way you let engineers loose in your basement spaces. That's what you get. It's not architecture. So it couldn't have been a general. It couldn't have been a you know, anything but a transitional episode in the evolution
Right.
of.
It was a palette changer, and it worked, right? We went on to better and greater things. But look, the elegance is also a sensation, in my opinion, right? You can
Sure.
absolutely, it's a work that integrates all the complexities, it develops formally. But also, when you show those images of Lisa looking up the tower, that moves you. That moves me in any case. And
Of course.
I feel again like I've been reinvented as a younger, more
No, I
handsome
still
person.
feel
It's a bond experience. It's like Saarinen makes me feel that way. That atrium makes me feel that way, right? There are few projects that make me feel that way, and all our work is based on those issues. So the question is that it does still have a resounding effect. And the notion of what you always talk about is kind of bringing everything together seamlessly. I don't think it's seamless anymore. I find it more interesting when it's got these shingles and the feathery
no,
and
no, no.
the
I agree with you. I mean, for me, it's
combination
what
of
I mean.
all these
Maybe
elements that people are grappling with, right?
seamless is the wrong word. You know, as I talk about, it's more about resonance and correlation. So what we avoid is just the collage of disparate and unrelated things.
That's
So
right.
I'm very interested into the radical differentiation of multiple ontologies, and even in an urban environment, multi-author, multi-system, but then if they start to resonate, if they kind of script off each other, respond, every action as a reaction, even if they remain radically different, they don't remain radically unrelated. The unrelated very quickly generates chaos, and I think we have an aesthetic sense. We can perceive. I mean, if there's one category which is kind of, I mean, aesthetic values keep migrating and shifting, and what we perceive as beautiful, as what we attracted to, what appeals versus repulses, historically evolves with the condition of a civilization. And we need to identify the morphologies that are life enhancing, and that changes. But I think what I believe or think that there is one thing which is a permanent feature within that, is that order versus chaos dichotomy. That is always there. And but what we accept and able to perceive as ordered evolves radically. So if you look at Le Corbusier in City of Tomorrow, for him order is always in position of an axis, a straight line, a grid, and he rejects, you know, the donkey's path because of its resistance. It kind of, he thinks the donkey is a scatterbrain but it's actually, but we have evolved our sense and perception of order. We don't think the donkey's path is kind of a disorder. Donkey's path is an algorithm which is actually quite efficient, and it is kind of tracking a topography and correlating the path with the topography rather than kind of an imposition. And let's say Frei Otto is a great genius to reveal to us that you have these form-finding processes in nature, and you can utilize that. And these are orders which aren't preconceived. It's not the Platonic order. It's not the kind of Euclidean geometries and so on. It's a deeper, different and other order, like the medieval. Frei Otto was the one who realized that the medieval street patterns, which the modernists, let's say an older, simpler sense of order, had to reject because it was obscure. There wasn't a recipe for that. Frei Otto found the recipe for this, and we suddenly enlightened us and allowed us to see deeper and more intricate and subtle orders. But it still remains. So what we accept as beautiful, but migrates. But that we remain. I think there's an intuitive. If you strip away the ideology of the one who is creating order, and more somebody who's kind of perceiving order, also nature, we have that intuitive capacity. And that's why I think we worry about is disorder, because that disorder we can't rely on, can't predict. We can't rely on its performance.
No, I understand what
And
you're saying.
so we have a kind of inbuilt I think sensitivity towards this kind of pattern recognition and intuitive grasp of learning intricate orders. Even we can't make them explicit. Like he understanding music is like this as well, and that revolves from a simple rhyme to a complex symphony.
Right.
And then you could play with a lot of counterpoint and layers and nearly kind of semi-dissonances, although it's also clear that the kind of Schoenberg seriality is never going to be part of the musical canon if it doesn't have a phenomenological, let's say, if the order remains maybe imperceptible forever because it is too complex. It's just a mathematical system.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a great way of concluding your talk, because I do feel that I mean, you're talking like an expert, right? I mean, you are an expert. So the way you're describing these relationships are expert-like, and you can see the nuances between the works of different architects and your own, and you can evaluate your own with regards to how the intricacies are developing through one project to another. And other experts can also understand that. And people who are not expert cannot participate in the discussion, right? I mean, it's as simple as that at a certain point. And I feel that that's an important lesson for all the students to learn, because once you cannot compare Calatrava to Liz Diller to Zaha Hadid Architects, you just cannot make that connection. And it's so wonderful to hear you explain super precisely through the expertise that you've developed over 30 years plus, in relation to what moves your projects and how it works and relates through intricacy, complexity, and eventually elegance. And that's the goal. So, Patrik, thanks a lot for your time. I mean, I could keep you here for hours, you know that. But I think we just need to go have dinner after the pandemic is over. The other thing I would like your opinion and a discussion on is impact, and see what you think about that. But that's for another day. Have you received impact, by the way, Patrik?
No, I haven't seen it yet. So
okay. So when you receive it, please text me or call me.
Okay. I hope it's on its way. No, I'm very curious. I'd like to see it.
All right, great.
But
thanks a lot for your
time. And thanks for the insightful questions. Always stimulating to have the dialogue. I'm already kind of inspired, and that's what we need. We need to kind of feedback and resonance and sometimes encouragement to do the next step, and that's what we want to. Thanks, everybody.
Please keep going, and please join our final review. I'm going to invite you. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, please. I will do that. I would love to see you.
All right. Terrific. Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye now.